The chalked number 47 hung from Sarah May Thornton's neck like a noose. She stood on the auction block, two small children clinging to her tattered skirt. Emma, 6 years old, screaming, Thomas, 4, silent with the shock only children know when their world collapses. Do I hear 150 for the woman and the girl? The auctioneer's voice cut through the September dust. The boy goes separate, too young for field work. Sarah's voice cracked with desperation. Please, someone take my children. Don't separate us. The crowd stood unmoved. They'd seen this before. Then a weathered farmer in the back row rose slowly, his face carved with old grief. He walked forward and whispered something that made 50 people fall silent. The auctioneer's hammer froze midair. What happened next would haunt Blackwood County for generations, not because of the horror of what almost happened, but because of what one broken man was willing to sacrifice. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Blackwood County, Arizona Territory, 1895. The courthouse steps had become a stage for humanity's darkest theater. Every quarter, the county held what they called debt settlements, a polite name for selling human beings to the highest bidder. The drought had lasted 3 years. Crops failed. Wells ran dry. Families who'd worked their land for generations watched debts pile up like tumbleweeds against a fence. Medical bills, property taxes, store credit, it all came due eventually. And when you couldn't pay, the county had a solution, a legal one. The September afternoon hung heavy with dust and shame. Well-dressed landowners examined the merchandise with the same calculation they'd use buying livestock. Sheriff's deputies stood by, enforcing what the law called justice, what desperate people called survival. Sarah May Thornton stood on that block because love had bankrupted her. At 25, she had already buried too many people. Her sister Margaret had died of cholera 6 months earlier, leaving behind Emma and Thomas. Margaret's last words still echoed. Don't let them take my babies to the orphan asylum. Sarah had tried. God knows she'd tried. Sold everything: land, livestock, her mother's wedding ring, worked as a seamstress until her fingers bled, took in laundry until her back screamed. But 2 children eat every day, and work dried up faster than the creek beds. The county claimed $127 in unpaid property taxes on Margaret's homestead. A year's wages. Impossible. The alternative was Blackwood Orphan Asylum, where children were worked like animals and treated worse. Sarah chose the auction block. At least she'd be sold with them. Jacob Holloway watched from the back row, his weathered face a map of old sorrows. 40 years old, hands scarred from 15 years of hard labor. He'd been county sheriff once, before he learned that having a badge didn't mean having courage. 15 years ago, he'd stood in this same courthouse and watched them auction his wife Catherine. She'd been 8 months pregnant. Jake had the authority to stop it, but feared losing his position. 24 hours of cowardice that cost him everything. Catherine died in a mine within 18 months. Their son disappeared into the orphan system. Jake had spent 15 years trying to forget. Today, something made him remember. Something in Sarah's eyes that looked like Catherine's last glance at him, desperate, disbelieving, already grieving what hadn't yet been lost. Sarah May Thornton was lot number 47, the last auction of the day. The earlier lots had sold quickly. Strong men for field work, their muscles appraised like horseflesh. Young women for domestic service, their hands examined for calluses that proved they knew labor. The buyers moved efficiently through human inventory, bidding with the casual expertise of men who'd done this before. Now only Sarah remained. Emma and Thomas hadn't eaten in 2 days. Sarah had given them her portion of bread that morning, watched them divide it with the solemn fairness of children who understand hunger. Thomas had tried to chew his shoe leather when he thought she wasn't looking. Emma kept whispering the same question. Aunt Sarah, are we going to be slaves? Each time. Sarah lied. No, honey. Someone nice will take us to a good place. The auctioneer, Mr. Grimsby, was a thin man with tobacco-stained teeth and eyes that calculated value the way a butcher weighs meat. Let's have a look at you, girl. He made Sarah open her mouth, checking her teeth like examining a horse. Made her walk the length of the platform while buyers assessed her gait, her posture, her capacity for labor. The humiliation burned. But Sarah kept her spine straight. She wouldn't break. Not in front of her children. Strong back, Grimsby announced to the crowd. Good for laundry, kitchen work, field labor if needed. Age 25, no visible ailments. Comes with 2 children. He said it like an afterthought, like mentioning a wagon came with a broken wheel. Then the children's turn. Emma was made to stand alone, small hands trembling. Girl is 6 years old, trainable for house service, can count, knows her letters. Thomas was lifted by his arm, dangling like a rag doll. Boy is 4. Grimsby's tone turned dismissive. Too small for productive work. A man stepped forward from the crowd. Mr. Cornelius Blackwood, owner of half the county. His suit cost more than most families earned in a year. Cold gray eyes swept over Emma with the practiced assessment of someone inventory checking livestock. He ignored Thomas completely. I'll take the woman and the girl, Blackwood announced. $200. He turned to Grimsby. The boy can go to the asylum. Sarah's world shattered. No! She lunged forward, but the sheriff's deputies caught her arms. You can't separate them. They're brother and sister. Emma was sobbing, clutching at Sarah's skirt. Thomas had gone completely still, his small face blank with trauma. 4 years old and already learning that the world could be unspeakably cruel. Please! Sarah screamed at the crowd. 50 faces stared back, unmoved. This happened every quarter. Families torn apart, children dispersed like unwanted furniture. Take all 3 of us. I'll work 20 hours a day. They're good children. Please don't send him away. Blackwood looked annoyed. The boy is dead weight. 200 for the woman and girl. Final offer. Grimsby raised his hammer. Do I hear $200 going once? Wait. The voice came from the back. Quiet. But something in it made everyone turn. Jacob Holloway was walking forward. His farmer's boots echoed on the wooden floor. His face was set like stone. But his eyes held 15 years of grief finally finding purpose. I got something to say, Jake said, his voice rough with buried emotion. The hammer remained suspended. The crowd held its breath. And Sarah Mae Thornton looked at this stranger walking toward her, wondering if he was salvation or just another variation of doom. Jake reached the auction block, and 50 pairs of eyes tracked his movement. Grimsby lowered his hammer slightly. Mr. Holloway, we're in the middle of... I know what you're in the middle of. Jake's voice cut clean. I stood in this exact spot 15 years ago. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of the older residents remembered Catherine Holloway being led away in chains while her husband, the sheriff, stood frozen, badge gleaming uselessly on his chest. Jake turned to face Cornelius Blackwood. Your $200 buys 2 people. I'll offer something different. Blackwood's eyebrows raised, amused. Oh, what can a dirt farmer possibly offer that I cannot? Jake reached inside his coat and pulled out a folded document. His hands were steady, but Sarah could see the white knuckles, the tension in his jaw. The deed to my farm. 160 acres. Clear title. No debt. The courthouse went silent. Jake, that's your life's work, someone shouted from the crowd. 15 years on that land. Another voice added. Blackwood took the deed, unfolded it, scanned the legal description. His eyes widened slightly. Even he couldn't hide his surprise. The land was prime territory, well watered, with standing timber, worth $800, maybe $1,000. You're trading your entire farm, Blackwood said slowly, for 3 strangers. Jake looked at Sarah for the first time, really looked at her, saw the gauntness of starvation hidden under dignity, Saw the way she held those children like they were all that kept her from falling into an abyss. Not strangers, Jake said quietly. They're what I should have fought for 15 years ago. He turned back to the crowd, and his voice grew stronger. I was county sheriff in 1880. Stood right here and watched them auction my wife Catherine. I had a badge. I had authority. I had the law on my side. His voice cracked. But I didn't have courage. Told myself I was following the law. Truth is, I was afraid of losing my position, my reputation, my comfortable life. He pointed at Thomas, still frozen in shock. That boy is 4 years old, same age my son was when I lost him to this system. Jake placed the deed on the auction table. You want money, fine. Sell my land, but all 3 of them come with me, or you can tear up that deed right now, and I walk away with nothing, which is what I deserve anyway. The crowd erupted in whispers. Blackwood's face had gone cold. Calculating. Interesting proposition. Holloway. Blackwood pulled out his wallet, thick with bills. I'll match your offer. I'll buy your land for $850 cash, and I'll pay $200 for the 3 of them. Total value over $1,000. He smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. But here's my condition. I take all 3 of them. You get your money and walk away. Buy yourself a new farm. Live comfortably. Isn't that better than destroying yourself for pride? Grimsby stepped forward, sensing opportunity. Gentlemen, we have 2 competing offers. That ain't how this works, Jake interrupted. The deed's only valid if I'm the buyer. I'm not selling my land to you. Blackwood, I'm trading it for them. Then I'll buy the deed from you afterward. Blackwood countered smoothly. Cash in hand. I'm offering you a fortune. Holloway, think carefully. You could start over. Stop. Sarah's voice cut through the argument. Both men turned to her. She was trembling, but her voice was steady. You're both deciding my fate like I'm not standing right here. Like I'm furniture you're haggling over. She looked at Jake, and her eyes were full of confused pain. Why? Why would you destroy yourself for us? You don't even know us. Jake met her gaze. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone heard. Because 15 years ago, my wife looked at me the way you're looking at me now, and I did nothing. If I walk away today, I might as well have died back then. He turned to Blackwood. And you don't see people. You see profit. You see property. That's the difference between us. Grimsby sensed opportunity the way a vulture smells death. Gentlemen, let's settle this properly. Open bidding. Blackwood straightened his collar. I'll buy Holloway's farm for $850. Take the 3 of them, and Holloway gets cash in hand today. Not selling to you. Blackwood, Jake said flatly. Blackwood turned to the crowd, raising his voice. Anyone here want to buy Holloway's land? I'll purchase it from you immediately for $900. A merchant near the front shifted forward. I'll take that deal. Jake's jaw tightened. He'd walked into a trap. Blackwood would get the land anyway, just through a proxy. The man was smarter than Jake had given him credit for. A lawyer in the crowd cleared his throat. Mr. Holloway, if you give up your deed, you'll have nothing. No land, no income, no way to support them even if you win this auction. Exactly, Blackwood said smoothly. You'll be homeless with 3 mouths to feed, at least with me. They'll have shelter and food. I'm not a cruel man. Holloway, I run a business. They'll be treated fairly. Sarah's voice was small. Maybe he's right. Emma suddenly spoke up, her child's voice cutting through the adult conversation. Mama Sarah said the Blackwood mines killed ladies. Is that true, Mr.? The crowd went silent. Everyone in Blackwood County knew about Cornelius Blackwood's labor practices, knew about the accidents that happened with suspicious frequency, knew about workers who entered his mines healthy and left broken. Blackwood's face darkened. Children should be silent in adult matters. Jake stared at him. That's your answer? Silence. I don't answer to farmers or their pet orphans. Jake reached into his other pocket and pulled out a second document. Then I got a better idea. He unfolded the paper. This is a contract I drew up last night. Couldn't sleep, so I wrote it out. His voice grew stronger. I, Jacob Holloway, will work as farm manager on my former property for whoever purchases it, for a period of 5 years, for no wage except room and board. The crowd gasped. Jake continued reading. The condition Sarah Thornton and her children live on the property as free persons, not servants. They can leave any time they choose. I stay for 5 years regardless. He looked at the merchant who'd offered to buy. You get a farm and an experienced manager. Better deal than cash sitting in a bank. Blackwood's face had gone white with anger. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about principle, about order, about the way things were supposed to work. You're making yourself a servant, Blackwood said, his voice tight. You're turning yourself into exactly what you claim to despise. No, Jake said quietly. I'm making a choice, something I didn't do 15 years ago. Blackwood stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. You're making a mockery of this institution. These auctions exist for a reason: to settle debts, maintain order, ensure consequences for failure. Order. Jake's voice rose. You mean a system where 4-year-old children are sold like cattle? A system where those who fail to pay their debts face consequences. Your sentimentality changes nothing. Holloway, the law is the law. The crowd was fracturing. Older folks who remembered Catherine Holloway were murmuring support for Jake. Younger businessmen sided with Blackwood's sentiment was bad for business, bad for the territorial economy. Women in the crowd were crying. Let him save them, one called out. He's destroying himself, a man argued. He's doing what's right, another countered. Grimsby banged his gavel. We need order here, Sheriff. Control this crowd. Sheriff Tom stepped forward, hand on his pistol. Everyone calm down. We'll proceed according to law. Blackwood raised his hand. Sheriff, I request a recess. I need to consult with county officials about the legality of Holloway's contract offer. Grimsby nodded quickly. 30-minute recess. Sarah was taken to a holding room with the children. Jake waited outside in the hallway. The door was thin. He could hear Emma crying. Blackwood found Jake in the corridor. Holloway, a word. They stepped into an empty office. Blackwood closed the door. You're being foolish, Blackwood said, his tone almost reasonable. Here's what I'll do. Keep your farm. I'll pay the woman's debt directly, $127. She goes free. Jake's eyes narrowed. And the children, they're part of the debt collateral. They stay on the auction block. No deal. Blackwood sighed. Then you lose everything. And they probably end up with me anyway. I have more money than you have principles. Holloway, I can outbid you, outmaneuver you, outlast you. Maybe, Jake said. But at least I'll know I tried. Tried? Blackwood laughed bitterly. You want to know about trying? My father was ruined by men like you, sentimental fools who thought feelings mattered more than law. He died broken because the system changed, because people started caring more about mercy than justice. That ain't justice in there, Jake said. That's cruelty with a legal stamp. Blackwood's face hardened. Then we have nothing more to discuss. In the holding room, Sarah held both children. Emma was crying into her shoulder. Thomas sat silent, staring at nothing. Aunt Sarah, Emma whispered. Why is that farmer man helping us? I don't know. Baby. Thomas spoke for the first time in hours. Is he our daddy now? Sarah broke down crying. She couldn't answer. Didn't know how to explain that a stranger was sacrificing everything while their own family, her cousins. Margaret's husband's relatives had all turned away when the debt came due. A female clerk brought them water. She was young, maybe 20, with kind eyes. That man out there, Mr. Holloway, the clerk said softly. He lost his family to an auction just like this. Sarah looked up. I heard. His wife, Catherine, was my cousin. The clerk's voice trembled. She was 8 months pregnant when they sold her. The baby died with her in the mines. Blackwood's mines. Sarah's breath caught. I didn't know. He's not trying to replace them, the clerk said. He's trying to save himself. 15 years of guilt is a heavy load, maybe heavier than any debt. She left Sarah with that thought. Outside the courthouse, word had spread through town, not the wealthy buyers, but ordinary folks, people who worked for wages, who knew what it meant to be one bad season away from ruin. They were taking up a collection. Mrs. Abernathy, an old widow, pressed coins into a hat. Jake Holloway helped me harvest wheat when my husband died. Never asked for payment. The blacksmith added bills. He shoed my horses on credit through the drought. Never pressed me for money. A shopkeeper counted out coins. Most honest man I know. If he says this is right, it's right. They raised $47 in 20 minutes. Nowhere near enough. But it was something. A young man pushed through the crowd. Reverend Samuel Price, new to town, only 28 but burning with conviction. Listen, he called out. We call ourselves a Christian nation, but we sell human beings on courthouse steps. The law says this is legal, but law and justice aren't always the same thing. Some people walked away, uncomfortable with the challenge. Others stayed, energized. Inside, Blackwood was addressing his supporters. Sentiment doesn't pay debts. The county needs that money. If we let one debt slide, where does it end? Business owners nodded. They had legitimate concerns about economic stability, about precedent, about the consequences of mercy. The moral lines weren't clean. They never were. Grimsby called everyone back inside. The courthouse felt smaller now, the air thick with tension. Sarah was back on the auction block, Emma and Thomas clinging to her skirt. The children's faces were streaked with tears and dirt. We will now conclude Lot 47, Grimsby announced. Current high offers Mr. Blackwood at $200 for woman and girl. Mr. Holloway offering property deed valued at $850 for all three, plus 5 years contracted labor. Jake stepped forward. I pledge my labor as stated. Total value over $1,000. Blackwood didn't hesitate. I'll buy his property through the merchant proxy, plus pay $300 cash for all three. Total $1,150. The crowd murmured. It was an astronomical sum for a quarterly auction. Jake stood frozen. He'd reached his limit, had nothing left to offer. His face showed the terrible arithmetic of a man who'd gambled everything and still come up short. Sarah watched this, horror dawning. 2 men were destroying themselves over her, and she was powerless to stop it, like furniture watching buyers argue over price. Stop! Her voice cracked through the courthouse. Everyone stop. Every head turned. I am a human being, Sarah said, her voice shaking but growing stronger. These are children, not property, not inventory, not livestock. She looked at Grimsby. You want $127 to settle the debt. Here's what I'll do. She reached into her bodice and pulled out a small cloth pouch. Her hands trembled as she opened it. A gold locket on a delicate chain spilled into her palm, the last thing she owned from her grandmother. This was my grandmother's, Sarah said. It's all I have left of my family. She threw it at Grimsby's feet. The locket hit the wooden floor with a small, final sound. Sell it. Should cover most of the debt. Grimsby picked it up, examined it with a jeweler's eye. This might fetch $60, maybe $70. Then I'll work off the rest. Sarah's voice didn't waver. Indenture me for 1 year, but let my children go free. No! Emma screamed. Mama Sarah! No! Thomas was sobbing now, the first sound he'd made all day. Sarah looked down at them, tears streaming. Emma, Thomas, You'll go with Mr. Holloway if he'll still have you. You'll be safe. You'll be together. That ain't the deal, Jake started. I won't let you destroy yourself. Sarah's voice broke. And I won't let my children be property. This is my choice, mine. The courthouse erupted. Some people were crying, others arguing. The careful order of the auction was dissolving into chaos. Then a voice from the back. I got $15 here from folks outside. Mrs. Abernathy pushed through the crowd, coins clutched in her weathered hands. The blacksmith followed. I got another 12. One by one, ordinary townspeople came forward. A seamstress, a stable hand, a shop clerk, dollar by dollar. Coins clinking into the growing pile on Grimsby's table. Reverend Price counted aloud. 35, 42, 58. The community was pooling everything they had. 65, 73, 89. Reverend Price's voice rang out. We have $89. Who else can help? An old man pushed forward Samuel Tucker, Jake's neighbor, former county clerk. He placed a worn leather pouch on the table. $45 in gold. Jake gave me his old pocket watch to hold. It's worth that much. Reverend Price's hands shook as he counted. $134, we have enough. The crowd erupted in cheers, people embracing, crying, celebrating. Blackwood's face had gone purple with rage. This is mob sentimentality. He turned to the sheriff. This auction is legally binding. You must enforce the law. Sheriff Tom looked uncomfortable. Technically, if the debt is paid, there's no need for... The debt is county debt. Blackwood's voice was sharp as a knife. The money must go to the county treasurer, not dropped in a hat like church collection. This is public debt, not private charity. The crowd fell silent. He was right. They'd forgotten that small but crucial detail. Grimsby nodded slowly. Mr. Blackwood is correct. Territorial law requires county debts be paid through official channels. Private donations don't satisfy the legal requirement. The hope that had blazed so bright guttered like a candle in wind. Samuel Tucker stepped forward again. Actually, Cornelius, there is a provision. He pulled a small, worn law book from his coat pocket. Territorial Statute, 1887. I helped write it when I was county clerk. His old hands flipped through pages. Here, Section 42. Private citizens may satisfy county debts on behalf of debtors through direct payment to county treasurer. He looked up. Payment must be equal to or greater than amount owed. If paid within legal proceeding, debtor is immediately released from obligation. Blackwood snatched the book, scanning the text. His face went pale, then red. But they don't have enough. You said 134. The debt is 127. But there are court fees, processing costs. The debt is $127. Tucker interrupted. Margaret Thornton's property tax assessment. Nothing more. Show me documentation of additional fees. Grimsby shuffled papers nervously. There are standard administrative costs. Produce the documentation. Tucker said calmly. Or I'll file a complaint with the territorial governor about fraudulent debt inflation. Grimsby went pale. His hands stopped shuffling. The crowd understood there were no legitimate additional fees. They'd been invented to squeeze more money from desperate people. We have $134, Reverend Price announced. $7 over the required debt. The law is satisfied. The crowd erupted again, louder this time. But Blackwood wasn't finished. He waited until the noise died down. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, deadly quiet. You fools. You think you've won? He pulled a different document from his coat. The county has a second claim. Child Abandonment Statute. He read aloud, minor children without means of parental support can be declared wards of the territory and placed in work homes for their own welfare. His eyes swept the crowd. Sarah Thornton is destitute. She cannot prove means to support 2 children. The debt may be satisfied, but the children remain subject to territorial custody. The words landed like stones in still water. Sheriff Tom closed his eyes. He's right. The law's been used before. If a parent can't demonstrate ability to provide for minors, the territory can intervene. Sarah's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees on the platform, still clutching Emma and Thomas. They'd been so close, so impossibly close. Jake stood there, helpless. Even the community's money couldn't solve this. The law had too many teeth, too many angles, too many ways to devour the vulnerable. Blackwood's voice was almost gentle. I'll make this simple. Sarah, you're free. Debt paid. But the children go to separate auctions as territorial wards. I'll bid low, no one else wants the burden now. He looked at Jake. And you. Holloway, keep your farm. Keep your pride. You fought well. But sentiment doesn't win against law. He straightened his collar. This is why the system works. It has rules. It has order. Your emotions are irrelevant. The courthouse had gone silent. Even the children had stopped crying, stunned into terrible quiet. Blackwood had won, and everyone knew it. Two deputies moved toward the platform. Their job was simple: separate the children from Sarah Thornton, process them as territorial wards, prepare them for individual auctions. Sarah fought. Not with violence, she had no strength left for that. But she wrapped her arms around Emma and Thomas and held on with everything she had. Please, she begged. Please don't do this. The deputies were gentle but firm. They'd done this before. Children torn from parents at auctions. Orphans redistributed. Families dissolved by law. It was terrible work. But someone had to enforce order. Emma was screaming, clinging to Sarah's neck. Don't let them take Tommy. You promised, Mama, you promised. The deputy pried her small fingers loose. One by one, Thomas, the quiet one, suddenly spoke. His voice was clear and steady, terrible in its calmness. Aunt Sarah, it's okay. You tried. We love you. 4 years old, accepting his fate. A child shouldn't have that kind of resignation. Shouldn't understand hopelessness so completely. Sarah's promise to her sister shattered in that moment. Margaret's last words, "Don't let them separate my babies," turned to ash. The crowd watched in horror. Even some of Blackwood's supporters looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Abernathy was sobbing into her hands. Reverend Price stood frozen, his young faith confronting evil it had no prayer to combat. Jake stood 20 feet away, watching. He'd seen this before. 15 years ago, he'd stood in almost this exact spot and watched deputies take Catherine away. She'd looked back at him once, just once, with eyes that asked a single question: why won't you stop them? He'd told himself he was powerless, just following orders, just enforcing law. His badge had felt heavy that day, but not heavy enough to move his feet, to make him act, to force him to choose courage over comfort. Catherine had died in darkness, underground, her body broken by labor her pregnancy couldn't sustain. Their son had vanished into the territorial orphan system like smoke, and Jake had lived with it. 15 years of mornings waking up knowing he was a coward. 15 years of nights dreaming about that one moment, that single choice, wondering if courage was something you had or something you decided. Now he watched Thomas's small face, the same age his son had been, accepting doom with quiet dignity. The cycle was repeating. History making the same terrible circle. If Jake walked away now, he might as well have died 15 years ago. Might as well have gone into that mine with Catherine. Something broke inside him. Or maybe something finally mended. Jake moved, not toward the children, toward Sheriff Tom. He walked calmly, deliberately, reached out and took the sheriff's pistol from its holster. Tom was so surprised he didn't react until Jake had already turned, raising the weapon toward Blackwood. The courthouse exploded in gasps and screams, people diving for cover, the deputies freezing mid-motion. Jake's voice was steady. "Release the children." Sheriff Tom raised his hand slowly. "Jake, don't do this. They'll hang you." "I'll hang anyway," Jake said. Been dead for 15 years. Might as well die for something. Blackwood stood very still. Fear flickered across his face, quickly masked by attempted dignity. You're proving my point. Holloway, lawlessness, violence. This is what happens when sentiment overrules order. Shut up. Jake's hand didn't shake. I'm done listening to you talk about law while children cry. The courthouse held its breath. Time stretched. Emma and Thomas stood frozen between deputies who didn't know what to do. Sarah found her voice. Jake, no. Please, you'll die. Maybe that's what should have happened 15 years ago. He looked at Sheriff Tom. Tom, you know me. I won't shoot an innocent person. But Blackwood here, he ain't innocent. He's killed more people with legal paperwork than most murderers kill with guns. This won't bring Catherine back, Tom said quietly. Jake's voice broke. I know. But maybe it'll let me sleep at night for once. Blackwood watched Jake's trembling hand, the gun wavering slightly. You won't do it. You're not a killer. You're right, Jake said. He lowered the gun, then suddenly swung it like a club, the metal barrel cracking against Blackwood's jaw. Blackwood collapsed, blood streaming from his mouth. Not dead, Jake had pulled the blow just enough, but unconscious, crumpled on the courthouse floor. Deputies tackled Jake immediately. He didn't resist. Let them pin his arms. Take back the gun. Force him to his knees. Sheriff Tom's voice was heavy with sorrow. Jacob Holloway, I'm arresting you for assault and theft of an officer's weapon. I know. They dragged him toward the door. Jake looked back once at Sarah. Blood from a deputy's elbow dripped into his eye, but he didn't blink. I'm sorry, he said. I tried. I ain't the hero I wanted to be. Sarah was crying. You're more than that. You're more than any of them. The door closed behind Jake. Blackwood was being helped to his feet, spitting blood and teeth fragments. His face was a mask of rage beneath the bruises. Assault on a citizen, he said, words slurred through his damaged mouth. He'll get 5 years hard labor in the territorial prison. Maybe more. Emma and Thomas were still held by deputies. The auction would continue. Everything Jake had tried to do had failed. Jake sat in a cell in the courthouse basement. 48 hours had passed. 2 days of stone walls and the smell of dampness and his own failure. They'd charged him with assault and theft of an officer's weapon. 50 witnesses, open and shut case. The territorial judge would sentence him to 5 years hard labor. Maybe more if Blackwood pressed for maximum punishment. Jake didn't care. At least he'd tried. At least Catherine's ghost might forgive him now. Footsteps on the stairs. Reverend Samuel Price appeared at the cell door, carrying a newspaper. Jake, don't give up. Jake looked up from the floor where he'd been sitting. It's over. Reverend, I committed assault in front of the whole county. Maybe. Price held up the paper. But something's happened. He passed the newspaper through the bars. The headline hit Jake like a fist. Charity work or debt auction, the Cornelius Blackwood scandal. Jake's eyes scanned the article, disbelief growing with each paragraph. The reporter was Clara Winston, a woman who'd been quietly working in the Territorial Records Office for 3 years. She'd been investigating debt auctions, compiling evidence, waiting for the right moment to publish. Jake's public stand had given her that moment. The article documented everything. Blackwood had been manipulating debt auctions for years, buying people at low prices, then hiring them out to mines and ranches at enormous profit, essentially running a slave trade operation under legal cover. Clara had names, dates, transaction records, 12 families over 5 years, people bought at auction who'd never been seen again, or who died under mysterious circumstances in Blackwood's operations. But the most damning revelation came in the third paragraph. County records show consistent inflation of debts immediately before auctions. Property taxes mysteriously increase. Medical bills acquire additional administrative fees. The pattern suggests coordination between county officials and private buyers. Sarah Thornton's debt was listed as an example. Original assessment $78, Final amount claimed $127. The difference, fake processing fees added by a county clerk on Blackwood's payroll. Jake's hands shook as he read. How did she get all this? He asked. 3 years of searching records, Price said. She knew something was wrong but couldn't prove it. Then she saw what you did, saw you willing to lose everything, and decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. Where is she now? In hiding. Blackwood's men are looking for her. Jake stood, gripping the bars. Reverend, this changes nothing for me. I still assaulted him. Read the rest. Jake's eyes dropped to the bottom of the article. Clara Winston had gone deeper than financial records. She'd interviewed people Blackwood had bought over the years, found workers who'd escaped his operations, documented abuse, starvation wages, dangerous conditions. Children worked until they collapsed. And she'd found something else. 15 years ago. A woman named Catherine Holloway had been sold at a Blackwood County auction. The buyer of record was listed as Southwest Mining Collective, a company that didn't exist. A shell name. Clara had traced the real owner, Cornelius Blackwood. Jake's vision blurred. The words swam on the page. Catherine. His Catherine. Blackwood had bought her. He knew, Jake whispered. At the auction, he knew who I was. Price nodded grimly. There's more. Clara's research had uncovered work records from Blackwood's mines. Catherine Holloway, purchased September 1880, assigned to shaft number 7, 8 months pregnant at purchase, gave birth December 1880 in the mine barracks, baby boy, taken to Blackwood Territorial Orphanage 3 days after birth. Catherine died January 1882. Cause of death listed as internal injuries from fall, but 3 other workers died the same month with the same listed cause. Clara suspected the records were falsified to cover up conditions. The baby boy had been registered under a different name in the orphan records. Standard practice: erase the past, make children more adoptable. Clara had cross-referenced ages, dates, physical descriptions, found a match. Tommy Tucker, 15 years old, stable boy working at the Blackwood County livery, brown hair, brown eyes, born December 1880 at Blackwood Mine Facility. Jake's son, alive. Jake's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees on the cell floor, the newspaper clutching in his hands. 15 years of believing his son was dead. 15 years of guilt compounded by grief. His boy was alive. Sheriff Tom appeared at the cell door. His face was grave. Jake, I need you to come with me. Where me? To meet Tommy Tucker. They walked through town together. Jake still in wrist chains, but no one seemed to care. Word had spread. People lined the streets, watching silently. Some nodded to Jake. Others just stared. The livery stable smelled like hay and horses. A young man was mucking out stalls, 15 years old, tall for his age, with Jake's eyes and Catherine's smile. Tommy turned when they entered, looked at Jake with cautious curiosity. Tommy, Sheriff Tom said gently, this is Jacob Holloway. He has something to tell you. Jake stood there, words trapped in his throat. How do you tell a boy you're his father when you abandoned him before he could walk? I know who you are, Tommy said quietly. Mrs. Winston came to see me yesterday. Showed me the records. I looked for you, Jake said, voice breaking. After your mother died, I searched every orphanage in the territory. They told me you died with her. They lied. Silence stretched between them. I was angry, Tommy continued. Angry at everyone. Then I realized being angry just makes you bitter, makes you like them. He set down his pitchfork. I don't know if I can call you father. Not yet. Maybe never. Jake nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand. But, Tommy hesitated. I watched what you did at the auction. Everyone's been talking about it. My mother died because no one fought for her. He looked at Jake directly. You fought for those children. That's something. Outside, the town was changing. Clara Winston's article had sparked outrage. not just in Blackwood County, but across the territory. Telegrams were flooding the governor's office. Other reporters were picking up the story. People were discovering they'd been overcharged. Not just Sarah Thornton, dozens of families over the years. Fake fees, inflated assessments, manufactured debts. The county treasurer was arrested within 24 hours. Then the clerk who'd processed the fraudulent charges. Then the auctioneer Grimsby, caught trying to burn records. A crowd gathered at the courthouse, demanding answers. Not wealthy buyers this time. Ordinary people who'd lost family members to debt auctions, who'd paid inflated taxes, who'd watched the system destroy their neighbors. Sheriff Tom stood on the courthouse steps, reading a statement from the territorial governor. All debt auctions in Blackwood County are suspended pending investigation. An emergency judge will review cases from the past 5 years. Blackwood tried to run. They caught him at the territorial border. Bags packed with money and documents he'd been trying to destroy. Brought him back in chains, the same chains used on auction victims. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. In jail, Blackwood and Jake occupied cells on opposite sides of the corridor. Neither spoke, but once Jake heard Blackwood whisper, "You still lost. Your wife is still dead." Jake's voice was cold. "But my son is alive, and you're going to tell me every detail of what happened to Catherine, or I'll make sure you hang." Sarah received visitors at the modest boarding house where she'd taken the children. The emergency judge, a stern woman named Margaret Ashford, came personally. "Miss Thornton, I've reviewed your case. The debt was fraudulent, built on falsified fees and inflated assessments." She handed Sarah a document. "Your sister's homestead is restored to you. Free and clear. All charges dismissed. The territory will provide compensation for wrongful auction proceedings." Sarah stared at the paper. "What about the others? How many families were destroyed?" "We're reviewing every case. It will take months, maybe years. But we'll make it right. Time won't bring back the dead," Sarah said quietly. Judge Ashford had no answer to that. Emma and Thomas were released from territorial custody immediately. They ran to Sarah, all three collapsing in an embrace on the boarding house floor. "Is it over?" Emma whispered. "Are we safe?" "Yes, baby. We're safe. We're going home." Thomas looked up, his young face serious. "What about Mr. Jake? Is he safe?" Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. "I don't know, honey. I don't know." Jake was released from jail 3 days after Clara Winston's article broke. The territorial judge dismissed all charges assault committed under extreme emotional duress caused by systemic corruption. It wasn't a full pardon, but it was freedom. Sheriff Tom walked Jake out personally. "There's someone who wants to see you." They went to the livery stable where Tommy Tucker worked. The boy was brushing down a mare, his movements careful and practiced. He looked up when they entered. Jake stood in the doorway, unable to move forward. 15 years of grief and guilt made his feet heavy. "Tommy," Sheriff Tom said, "I'll leave you two alone." The door closed. Father and son faced each other across 15 feet of hay-strewn floor. "I don't know what to say," Jake began. "I looked for you after your mother died. I searched every orphanage from here to Santa Fe. They told me you died with her." Tommy set down the brush. "The orphanage matron told me that story too. Said my parents were dead, that I was alone." "You were never alone. I didn't know where you were." Tommy's voice was steady, but Jake could hear the pain underneath. "I was angry for a long time. Angry at you for not finding me. Angry at her for dying. Angry at the whole world. You had every right to be. Maybe. But I watched what anger did to the other boys in the orphanage. Made them mean. Made them small." Tommy looked at Jake directly. "Then Mrs. Winston showed me the records. Showed me what Blackwood did. What the system did." He paused. "My mother didn't leave me. You didn't abandon me. We were all just caught in something bigger than us." Jake's voice broke. "I should have fought harder. 15 years ago, I should have. But you fought now, Tommy interrupted. Everyone in town is talking about it. You were ready to lose everything for those children. He picked up the brush again, running it along the horse's flank. I don't know if I can call you father. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's a word that means something, and I don't know if we've earned it yet. Jake nodded, tears streaming down his weathered face. I understand. But, Tommy's voice softened. I'm glad you're not dead, and I'd like to know you, if that's okay. That's more than I deserve. They didn't embrace. Not yet. But they sat together on hay bales and talked. First conversation between father and son in 15 years. Awkward, painful, but real. Tommy asked about Catherine. Jake told him everything he remembered: how she laughed, how she sang while cooking, how she'd wanted to name their son Thomas after her father. Thomas, Tommy repeated. Tucker was just the name they gave me, but Thomas was hers. Thomas Holloway, Jake said quietly. If you want it. Tommy didn't answer immediately, just sat with the weight of that offer. 2 weeks later, Sarah visited Jake at his farm. She brought Emma and Thomas, who immediately ran off to look at the chickens Jake kept. Sarah and Jake stood on the porch, watching the children. Neither spoke for a long moment. I don't know how to thank you, Sarah finally said. Don't. I did what I should have done a long time ago. You were ready to lose everything. Jake looked at her. I'd already lost everything. You gave me a chance to find something. Sarah sat down on the porch step. People in town are saying... They're saying maybe you and I know what they're saying. Jake sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. And I'll tell you straight, I can't be what you need. Not yet. I know. I got 15 years of guilt to work through. And a son who barely knows me. I wouldn't be fair to anyone right now. Sarah nodded. I understand. And honestly, I'm not ready either. I need to figure out who Sarah Thornton is when she's not just surviving. They sat in comfortable silence. But I can be a friend, Jake said. And those children, I'd like to be part of their lives. If you'll let me. I'd like that too. Jake told her his plan. I'm going to sell part of my land. Use the money to start a fund to help families in debt before they get to the auction block. Sarah's eyes lit up. My sister's homestead. I'm going to turn it into a shelter for women and children with nowhere to go. Catherine would have liked that. Margaret, too. They were both healing by helping others. Maybe someday there could be more between them. But for now, this was enough. 6 months passed. Emma and Thomas thrived on Sarah's restored homestead. The land Margaret had died trying to keep was now a place of safety and growing things. Emma was learning to read from Reverend Price's wife. She kept a journal, practicing her letters every night by lamplight. Thomas was still quiet, but he smiled more, laughed sometimes. The trauma would take years to fade, but he was a child again instead of a small adult carrying impossible burdens. They visited Jake's farm every Sunday. It became routine, Thomas helping with the animals, Emma chattering about everything she was learning, Sarah and Jake talking over coffee about their separate projects to help others. Tommy Tucker, who now sometimes answered to Thomas Holloway, joined them most Sundays. The relationship between father and son was growing, slowly, like crops after drought. Not rushing, just steady. One Sunday, Thomas the younger was helping Jake fix a fence. The boy looked up at him seriously. Jake, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Jake was surprised. Like me, why? Because you stood up when everyone else sat down. Jake had to turn away to hide his tears. This was what Catherine would have wanted. Not perfection, not erasing the past, just trying to be better. Emma read from her journal one evening. Today, Jake showed me a picture of his wife. She looked kind. He cried, but said they were good tears. He said she would have loved us. I think she would have too. She looked at Sarah. I'm going to be brave like her, and like you, and like Mr. Jake. 1 year after the auction, Sarah hosted a gathering at her homestead. Not quite Thanksgiving that was still months away, but a celebration of survival. Jake and Tommy came. Mrs. Abernathy brought pie, the blacksmith and his family, Reverend Price and his wife, Sheriff Tom, who'd become an advocate for reforming the debt system, Clara Winston, the reporter whose courage had broken everything open, even some of the families they'd helped through Jake and Sarah's programs. Children played in the yard. Adults talked and laughed on the porch. Not a perfect family, a chosen family, made of broken pieces that somehow fit together. Jake caught Sarah's eye across the yard. They smiled at each other, still not romantic, but something warm. Understanding between survivors, shared purpose, gentle hope. Maybe someday there would be more. Maybe not. For now, this was enough. Emma and Tommy, the older one, were teaching Thomas the younger how to dance, stumbling over each other's feet, all three laughing. Jake watched his son laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in his memory. Sarah watched her makeshift family, tears of relief streaming down her face. The sun set warm over the Arizona territory, painting everything gold, not happily ever after. That was a child's story, and they'd all learned that life was harder than fairy tales. But healing together, and sometimes that was better. The story of Jacob Holloway and Sarah Mae Thornton became legend in Blackwood County, not because of dramatic heroics, but because of what happens when ordinary people refuse to accept cruelty as normal. Jake learned that redemption isn't found in erasing the past, but in choosing differently when the moment comes again. His 15 years of guilt didn't vanish, but they found purpose. Sarah discovered that survival isn't just enduring, it's rebuilding something better from the ashes. The children learned the most important lesson: families aren't just born, they're chosen. Emma, Thomas, and young Tommy Holloway grew up knowing that love isn't about blood or obligation, but about who stands beside you when the world tries to break you. The community realized their power. One man's courage had sparked a movement. Clara Winston's journalism exposed corruption that had festered for years. Ordinary people pooling their dollars proved that collective action could challenge even entrenched systems. The debt auction system in Arizona territory was reformed within 2 years. Not perfect systems rarely are, but better. And sometimes better is all we can ask for. Now, we ask you, have you ever witnessed injustice disguised as law? Have you stood silent when you wished you'd spoken? Or has someone stood up for you when you couldn't stand up for yourself?